Morning and good afternoon to all the participants. I'm Marco Nicoli and would like to welcome you to this webinar. I'm here at the World Bank office in Washington, D.C. with my colleagues Natalia Agapitova and Elaine Tinsley. And we welcome you all. We will start soon. We'll probably wait a few minutes because we changed the technology from WebEx to this webinar, and so some of the participants are still connecting to the other system. So we are sending information on how to connect properly with our webinar. So please, be patient. We hope that this webinar will be of interest and that we'll have an interaction of comments and active participation also from your side. Today the program is pretty flexible, but we will start with Natalia Agapitova, who is the lead of the Social Enterprise Innovation Program at the World Bank. And she will present the program, which I believe is very pertinent to our human-centered business model. Then Elaine Tinsley, who's a private sector specialist, will talk about how this social enterprise business model is relevant to our project. Then we will have a session for question and answers, and hopefully, if Professor Fici will be connected and we'll have enough time, we'll give a few minutes, some time to Professor Fici to talk about his article. We can start. So, Natalia, please, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much. Maybe the camera as well. Hello, I'm very glad to be here, and thank you very much for your interest towards the Social Enterprise Innovations Program. I just wanted to start by explaining the objectives of the presentation. I would like to quickly run through the presentation jointly with my colleague Elaine. I will start by discussing the program, explaining the rationale and why the World Bank Group is supporting social enterprises. I will then explain a little bit on the program components, our experiences, and some country applications of what we're doing on the ground. And then I will pass the mic to Elaine, who will talk specifically about some examples from more development goal perspective of social enterprise business model to refugee and migrant challenge, improving inclusive jobs, and so on. Feel free to post questions at any time in the chat room, and we'll be both collecting them during the discussion, but we also will leave ample time for the question and answers at the end of the presentation. So, in terms of the rationale for the program, sorry, where is it? It's not working. So the World Bank has been focusing on the private sector support to development goals for quite a long time, but I think the social Sustainable Development Goal agenda is opening a new window in the interaction between the government, the donors, and the private sector. It was quite important that the private sector participated in the establishment of the development goal and is openly recognized and as an active and important contributor to the social and development objectives around the world. This brought the attention of many governments towards how they could engage with the private sector actors, and it also rejuvenated the donor interest and support in social enterprises. Social enterprises is not a new phenomenon. They existed in many countries for decades, and the sector is on the growth. We know those are real and tangible organizations. We have data and evidence that support the existence and demonstrate the potential of their contribution for achieving the reduced poverty targets, creating entrepreneurial opportunities and livelihoods, especially for very rural and remote populations, inclusive jobs agenda, also connecting the poor to more integrated value chains, both within their countries and outside, creating a more shared value economy, and also supporting innovation at the grassroots and promoting adoption and adaptations of innovative solutions to address the poverty challenge. All of this comes within more or less gray areas that connect a range of enterprises and organizations in between the classic charity and NGO programs that run largely on donor funding to all the way through purely commercial enterprises that focus on profit making. So in between those two extremes, there is a gray area that we call social enterprises, but I know the program that Marco is leading calls human-centered design business model. I think the principles are largely the same. Those are the organizations that focus on maximizing social return on investment and establishing a solid business model that can promote financial sustainability. So for this organization, there is a balancing act and trade-off between social return on investment and financial return on investment. And where the classic businesses will always lean towards maximizing the financial return on investment, the social enterprise would maximize the social or environmental return on investment while maintaining a financially balanced and healthy model. So this is just one particular definition, and as all of you know, there is no unified and universally accepted definitions of social enterprises or human-centered businesses. And this is a challenge, especially for donors and the government programs that would like to engage with social enterprises at scale, because it limits the dialogue and it limits the collection of data, and it also limits the formulation of policy exchanges. So we looked at a number of countries that did adopt legal definition and legal form of social enterprises, and Italy, South Korea, and United Kingdom here on the screen as examples. And here again, we see that there is a variety of approaches, and there are some universal parameters that apply to these organizations, like, for example, limitation of profits or redistribution of profits back into the activity of the enterprise, importance of stakeholder participation, of beneficiary participation in governance and decision-making of the organization. But we also know from the studies of social enterprises in these countries that even when legal forms or legal definitions exist, not all of the social enterprises will adopt them and function as this particular legal form. So the social enterprise as a sector will span across many forms, even when the government adopted a particular legal definition. And so the operational and conceptual definitions also are important for the engagement with the social enterprise sector. Just to demonstrate a particular example of a social enterprise in a developing country, Living Goods is a for-profit organization that started acting as an NGO and then gradually moved into the commercial sector and became a firm. The objective was to promote the access of the rural poor across Africa to safe and effective drug treatment. Many countries in Africa have issue with counterfeit drugs. In countries where the drugs for the poor, especially life-saving drugs like malaria medication, are supposed to be free, they are not de facto free in rural areas where people don't have access to them, and where often the quality of the government clinics and the drugs they provide is fairly low. So there is a huge issue of access. And Living Goods is an organization that, while making a profit, they're striving to support the inclusive value chain and deliver drugs to the poor and in most remote communities at an affordable price point, which ultimately has a huge benefit for them in terms of savings and increase in personal livelihood and health outcomes. For example, in Uganda, the organization ran a randomized controlled trial, and they demonstrated that for just $2 per year, they can decrease child mortality by more than 25%. So really good outcomes for a very affordable price while sustaining financially profitable model for the social enterprise. At the same time, Living Goods also improves the livelihoods and skills of local community health workers. These are mostly women, and they improve both their medical skills and capacity to assess sicknesses and recommend viable and appropriate medical treatment for them, but also they start selling the drugs that Living Goods provide to them at below market rates and earn a small income, and then the recognition for their contribution in the communities increase, and that promotes kind of a virtual circle for sustainability and improvements at many levels. So what our program is doing with this type of organizations. This is a snapshot of what is the objective. So we are looking at working especially with low-income markets, so very poor population, and supporting social enterprise sector in this context to realize the potential for maximizing social and economic return while creating the financially sustainable, locally owned models for jobs and service delivery. We have recreated in our program a microcosm that demonstrates how social enterprise sector overall could be supported. Obviously, one of the key issues that any organization face is how to get access to funding throughout the development cycle of the organization. So one of the most commonly used instruments to support social enterprises are grants or subsidized grants and matching grants, etc. We have run a development marketplace program at the World Bank. In fact, the World Bank was one of the first organizations to support the social enterprise sector, which we did since 1998. The development marketplace program funded more than 1,600 organizations over 18 years, and we have quite a lot of knowledge about both our portfolio of social enterprises and their models, but also about how to best target them and how to best fund them and what are the appropriate mechanisms of support in developing context especially. So we have the crowdsourcing platform where we can run competitions ourselves, but we can also build capacity of partners on the ground to establish their competitive funding programs and run them. And often we also use this platform as kind of a fund of funds to bring in investment from development partners together for accelerated and improved and expanded impact. So financial side is just one of the problems for social businesses, and yet the businesses and capacity remains one of the key constraints. So we've worked over the years on an expanded curriculum for social enterprises based on our needs assessment and knowledge and expertise of what are the types of capacity challenges they face on the ground. This content is packaged, could be packaged as both face-to-face module, where we have a large set of experiences covering business, how to develop innovative business model and sustainable business model and replicate them in poor contexts, but also about how innovative approaches like human-centered design, behavioral change models could be deployed to design better and improved services, and also how to use additional resources like monitoring and evaluation, communication strategies, collective leadership to build sustainable models on the ground. Capacity development of social enterprises is not the only constraint to the growth. We know that the governments could engage with them much more effectively and create integrated systems of both service delivery and expanded economic outcomes. So we have content for engagement with the policymakers for them to learn about how social enterprises can become better partners in achieving the objectives of their countries, development objectives of their countries. So this policy course is available in a face-to-face option only for the moment, but we're also planning to put it as an e-course, which is the case with our course for social entrepreneurs. Then we also help counterparts and especially government counterparts to better understand the variety of conditions that affect social enterprise activity and performance. We have a methodology and tool for the ecosystem diagnostic of the social enterprise sector that looks both at supply and demand factors. So who needs the social enterprise services and what are the market and government gaps that they can help to address and where they can really make a difference in the lives of poor. But it also looks at ecosystem conditions like policies and regulations, financial markets and financial systems, networks and information, and additional conditions like infrastructure and human resources that basically together form the ecosystem and the enabling environment of the social enterprise sector. We've run these diagnostics in 20 countries by now, and they can be used for comparative analysis, benchmarking, and also for creating a baseline for government actions. And the final part is the knowledge base, where over years we've collected knowledge about the development marketplace grants, but we also partnered with external organizations and have now an expanded knowledge and diagnostic about the social enterprise sector. We work with a number of beneficiaries, including the government, the social enterprises, the World Bank Group, internal staff and donors. We work a lot through our World Bank Group operations, creating kind of a friendly environment for the government and the social enterprises to interact, create the initial connections, build the trust, and then expand their interactions. So these are just some examples on countries where we engaged on the ground with social enterprises. And let me give you an example of India, where we worked during the last 6 years on helping social enterprises to scale and replicate their impactful business models in poor and remote communities, and where we help the government to better understand the impact of the social enterprise sector on the development objectives of the country, the potential and the ways in which they can leverage social enterprise solutions. So in India, we are part of the country partnership framework that the World Bank Group has with the Indian government. And this country partnership framework had a particular pillar on service delivery, especially in the rural communities. The service delivery was lagging on many aspects, and the government was interested in engaging with the private sector and seeing how they can promote better impact from the private businesses on the ground. One of the key aspects that prevented them from working with social enterprises is that they were more active in more advanced and richer states of India than in lagging states, and that also they were very small and the government didn't really have the tools and instruments for engaging with them. So we've done a number of things. One, we run the development marketplace competition to reduce the barrier of entry of proven and existing social enterprise solutions in India in poorer contexts. We help the organizations to gather data and create a reliable and an effective data pool that can help support the dialogue with the government and demonstrate their results on the ground. We also help them through public-private dialogue to exchange with the government and explain the types of solution they can bring and discuss how they can be part of the integrated system jointly with the government and use existing instruments like, for example, public procurement to expand the opportunity for collaboration with the government. over the 3 years of experience and a lot of data gathered, we started engaging with the government at the federal level as well. There was a lot of sectoral interest, especially from the health sector, on how private companies could contribute to the health sector solution. So we had a particular public-private dialogue focused on the health outcomes in India. We also engaged with sectoral ministries that had cross-cutting agendas, like, for example, entrepreneurship. And the Ministry of Skill Entrepreneurship emerged as a leader of social enterprise agenda in India, and they actually adopted a particular policy under the 2015 Skills and Entrepreneurship Policy, which has a feature on social enterprises. There are other partners that help the government to focus on social entrepreneurship. The British Council, for example, did a lot of work on the ecosystem diagnostic, and so we also help to convene these different partners in supporting the government. In terms of tools and services that we provide, so we have the diagnostic tool that I mentioned. We have the methodology, but also the automated system that can help collect data on the ground and record data in a comparable tool, and that reduces the need for recreation and invention of survey tools and instruments, because this kind of compiles different types of questionnaires, interview sets in one place, and people who would like to deploy the diagnostic tool on the ground could just use the tool and then adjust it to their conditions, and then tap into the diagnostic that we run to compare results of what they find on the ground for other countries. We also, on designing operations, we have conducted a review. It's not a comprehensive review. It was based on the review of 14 country cases of how different types of government support social enterprises, and we developed a catalog of different policies and instruments that could be used in also developing country conditions, and we also created kind of a taxonomy of different level of government engagement with the social enterprise sector. We are very active on the capacity building stage. I mentioned the e-learning course we had for social enterprises. This is the course on the same platform where we are now, the Open Learning Campus, which can be accessed in a self-paced and also facilitated mode. And in a facilitated mode, we after 5 weeks of the course, we award certificate for completion for those social enterprises who completed the course. And so far, we trained about 500 social enterprises, and it was a fairly successful experience. We're also planning to put the policy course on the e-learning platform, and also our toolkit for crowdsourcing innovations in development, which especially explores how different types of crowdsourcing competitions challenges can be used for effective targeting and funding of social enterprises. And then finally, we are really focusing on how to create a consolidated and improved learning and knowledge about the social enterprise sector at scale. We run social enterprise surveys. The most recent one is in India. It covers 580 social enterprises in India, and is quite a unique data set on the sector in a developing country. But we also derive learnings and conclusions from this various experiences in the systematized form of business model innovation. And I will invite my colleague Elaine Tinsley to discuss those. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Natalia. Thank you very much for joining us for our webinar. We greatly appreciate your interest in the social enterprise sector. We find that this is a very useful sector that we see great potential in helping achieve the SDGs and development outcomes. I'm just going to go through some of the business models that we have looked at, particularly on service delivery. We've looked at business models that social enterprises have developed that are both innovative and inclusive, and whether the target population is the poor as the producers or they're the poor as the customers. And we've looked at models that are in water and sanitation, models in energy, health, education, and agriculture, and also waste. We're expanding it And then there's also models that are also in livelihoods and job creation, but our key focus has mainly been on service delivery so far, because we see the greatest potential for making it aligned with the SDGs. So, Lisa, how do you do? So, and the first part is the inclusive economic opportunities. This is the one key area where we see a lot of service delivery models for social enterprises. It's also for skills development. When you do have social enterprises, what's good is you're getting to the grassroots, you're getting to the base of the pyramid. You're able to provide services like water ATMs, which are water, clean water services in areas that previously haven't been served by the government. So you're providing clean water, and you're developing a sustainable business model that can help, that has the poor as the center, as the customer, which makes the client, the social enterprise, more responsive and making it a more human-centered approach with the poor as their main empowered customer, as opposed to like when you have an NGO that comes in, the NGO is mainly even though the poor are their beneficiaries, it's a different attitude to how you treat your beneficiaries towards how you treat your customers. And when you take that kind of focus and you're looking at how do I improve my services to make the customer want to have my product, it's a very different dynamic. Also working at the base of the pyramid, you're able to improve the entrepreneurship skills. The social enterprises are they're known also for being actually more inclusive in working together with their customers, but also incorporating them as employees. They're more responsive to their needs. And so we see it becomes a much more stronger, sustainable model for them to actually continue this business model. Whereas sometimes when you have a government intervention or you have a donor that comes in and provides clean water, there's issues with operations and maintenance. With a social enterprise model, it's a more sustainable business model because they're factoring that into the price, and it doesn't require frequent injections of capital to sustain. But it's all inclusive. Sorry, Lisa. So on skills, we see lots of different ways to improve the skills for the bottom of the pyramid. There's learning centers, skills outsourcing, and financing and upskilling. So besides doing service delivery, there's also skills and job creation enhancements that you can do. We've also looked at another key target area on the inclusive economic opportunities that applies to pretty much all countries. But there's also special social enterprises that can work with refugees and migrants. A lot of times you'll find that you need decentralized solutions that have to be addressed for refugees and migrants that don't have the public infrastructure set up to help them, that have more social problems that need to be addressed. And social entrepreneurs are a good way to kind of build up that social fabric, build up the network, and to help address key societal problems and fractures. And they can do this, bringing innovations into the refugees and migrants communities, delivering service delivery that otherwise might not happen. You can improve security and reduce violence against women and children, and you can also promote access to finance through social enterprises. And so you're bringing in private sector solutions that actually also builds up their skills while they're displaced and helps them to resume their life once they are resettled. And the idea is to work closely with the government to be able to kind of help these enterprises seed up. We talked about some of the policy tools that can be used for doing that, including the crowdsourcing, but there's also other mechanisms for being able to address how you can bring the funding into the migrants to help support social enterprises, which will then lead to helping to support enterprises that are servicing the poor, but also creating the job opportunities and employment creation. One example of that would be to take a low-cost school. Bridge Academy is one of the most prolific providers of low-income schools in Africa. They've been able to standardize their business model. They've standardized the content, and they're able to deliver schools in it's about 1/3 the price that the government actually costs the government. So for example, parents will pay $7 a month for their children to go to school compared to the government public sector cost of $21 per child. So they're able to do this more efficiently, but what's also really amazing is the outcomes that they get from this. The test scores are much higher than when they did the standardized tests than the government schools. So a child that actually went to a Bridge Academy school in a low-income neighborhood was 40% more likely to graduate, to pass the national tests than a similar child in the same neighborhood going to a public school. And the fact that they're able to do things more efficiently and cost effectively is because they've created a model that has standardized materials. Instead of requiring 2 years to instruct a teacher, because they're not having to teach the teacher content, but rather they're providing the content on tablets that are standardized and can be updated. They're also able to iterate on the content very quickly. So let's say they wanted to teach geometry and there were 2 ways to teach it. They could test one method with half the schools and then a method with another 200 schools, test the students, see which group of students perform better, and then whichever method seems to work the best, then they can immediately standardize it across all the schools. You don't get that kind of response in the public sector. And what we're seeing now is that in Liberia, they've looked at what Bridge has been able to do in Kenya and to be able to improve the outcomes, and they've taken this private sector innovation and they've started to put it into the public sector schools. So they have a contract with the Liberian government that is adapting that for the public schools. So it's still public school provision, but with the private sector innovation. And I think it's in the pilot stage right now. This is the first year that they're trying it. They've had to develop content. They had to kind of adjust how to work in a area that has maybe low ICT connectivity, because this is one of the requirements for keeping the content standardized and updated. Another thing with the content for the Bridge Academy was that you're able to track how teachers are performing. You're able to track whether teachers are showing up in their classrooms. And when you're able to do that, then you're able to actually improve how they interact with the students. You're able to make sure that teacher absenteeism isn't an issue anymore, because you can track where the teacher is, if the teacher is in the classroom, and also where the teacher is in the course, whether they're able to follow the course or not. So this all helps provide the content to the students in a much richer fashion. It's more complete, and it also takes the burden off the teachers from having to do lesson preparation. So we're looking forward to seeing how it turns out in Liberia, which is we find is a very interesting case study of being able to adapt private sector innovation into the public sector school system. And going along with the third area where you can improve resilience to conflict, we see like a lot of like Liberia is also it's a post-Ebola country where has been a lot of damage to the social fabric. So Bridge Academy coming into it is a way to actually improve their educational outcomes, but there are also other models to help improve resilience. One of them is to improve agricultural productivity. There are several social enterprises that work throughout the value chain and agricultural productivity to help deliver services to smallholder farmers. These are social enterprises that are specifically targeted to improving smallholders, whether it's to improve extension services to them. They use this through ICT, or they use it through one-on-one, of multimedia platforms. And their models are very interesting in the sense that they produce great results. Sometimes they work with the government extension services, sometimes they work independently of it. But they're able to do much more than the traditional public sector extension services, which go one-on-one to the farmers. These extension services that we've seen, and I'll show you one, is able to take advantage of technology to be able to deliver services much more quicker to the farmers. For example, Isoko provides 3 levels of information to farmers. One is SMS messages on the weather. They can tell them if it's going to rain the next day. If they know it's going to rain the next day, then they know not to put fertilizer on their crops, because otherwise that's a wasted cost. They also provide market prices regionally, so farmers can decide, is it worth it for us to hire a truck to send it to a different market, or should we just sell it to the local market? They also provide SMS messages on farming tips. And they build up on this model, and they also extend it to having a head farmer that also does display showcases with other farmers, and they have a call center that if they come across a farming tip that they don't quite understand, they're able to call into the call center to get clarification on it. So what we find with social enterprises is, they start off with one thing and then they realize to make it more effective, they have to innovate and iterate on their model to be able to provide things much better. And so with the SOCO, if you can see on the photo, you can see one farmer on the left-hand side has used the SOCO tips, and the farmer on the right-hand side, even though it's the same grain, it's the same crop, didn't follow the SOCO tips, and the difference in contrast within the fields is quite stark. The SOCO now serves over 350,000 farmers in 10 countries. They're able to scale, and this is just an example of one social enterprise. There are many others that have different models of how they reach farmers, how they help improve their productivity. And these are things that, I think the more we can expand, the more we can get them to work with the government to help scale up, we'll be able to help improve farmers' and livelihoods, incomes, and help reduce the conflict. So.
Well, thank you very much to Natalia and Elaine. I think that the presentation was pretty broad, and you kept short, but the content it's huge, and it will be really worthy for our group to dig into the details of the huge knowledge that you have put together. I would like at this point to open the discussion and question and answer session. So what is the way that participants can join? Oh, we have questions. I cannot read from here because these are.
So we received 2 questions from William Hill. One on the ecosystem diagnostic and another one on the refugee examples. So we'll maybe start with the refugee example and then go through the questions in the chat room, but then you can also unmute your mic and intervene whenever you want. It's only the chat room intervention. So if you have a question, please post them in the chat room.
On the refugee ones, clearly there's room and scope for more to be developed, but I can give you 2 examples of them. One is with the water and sanitation services, where you have service toilets. Service toilets are useful where you don't have public infrastructure to take, to have toilets. But how the service toilets work is you have toilets that it's like latrines, but the waste material is removed. And what this one company, Sanovation, does is they remove the waste, and then they actually convert the waste with agricultural biomass to make charcoal briquettes. They also do this they started off in Kenya, but it's also a model that they've replicated in refugee camps. But in the one that they do in the counties is actually they're then able to sell. So they have 2 revenue streams for it. One is the collection of the waste, and the other one is the selling of the briquettes that they've actually created from the waste. It sounds a little unique to have human waste briquettes, but they're actually quite innovative in the sense that they're actually very low burning. They're actually cleaner than regular charcoal. So you have that element of reducing deforestation. And they're great for barbecuing because they burn at a very low heat. But for the refugee things, it's a good way to pull out the waste, convert it to briquettes that can also be used and provide a source of energy. You can also see that with biogas, biodigesters. That's another model that's also been useful because you're extracting the waste that would otherwise be in the camps, and you're able to convert that to energy. And more we're seeing a lot of players within that space that have actually been good at reducing the cost of that. Another model that we see in the refugee camps is actually for menstrual hygiene. This is a key issue which people don't really consider too much, but women will have their periods every single month, and it has to be an issue that has to be addressed. And the availability of sanitary pads is not always there. But we've seen social enterprises that have developed machines where you can use local products to develop biodegradable sanitary pads.
And adding on to what Elaine said, I think she provided very good, very specific and concrete examples. But rest assured, we have scanned 6,000 organizations globally to identify business models that can help address poverty challenges at scale in a cost-effective model that can reach the base of the pyramid in the very remote last mile conditions. And refugees camps are not different. So the work that Elaine led on summarizing and systematizing the lessons of experience into kind of model at the model level, we know there are thousands of organizations that can deliver those solutions in a variety of countries. So service toilets, it's not just Sanivation or Sanergy. We know there are hundreds of organizations that have low-cost solutions that have different parameters that could be customized to a variety of conditions. Similar thing with water ATMs that could be put anywhere, including the refugees camps, low-cost schools, including teaching by distance or tablets. Again, very quick to deploy, relatively low cost, high quality outcomes. There are also more specific issues of, for example, violence, and we know that refugees camps are microcosm of a lot of kind of violent conflicts, and especially women and younger kids are suffering. So we have a lot of digitally empowered social enterprises that help to provide hotline feedback mechanisms and help to address also the root cause of the violence, where women and other disadvantaged part of the people remain silent, don't seek help, and then procreate the vicious circle of abuse. So these are large scopes of solutions and could be deployed by the government and by the private sector, and especially where donor support exists, we know they can be much more effective. In terms of the other question on the diagnostic, so the ecosystem diagnostic we have built largely on the ecosystem diagnostic for small and medium enterprises, but then looks in depth in particular aspects that disproportionately affect social businesses, social enterprises. So we look at information and networks. So, for example, one of the findings we have on the ground is that there is very little information that can guide decisions of social enterprises in poor contexts where government statistical systems are not there. And so social businesses become responsible for tracking results along the whole value chain of their impact. And that's very difficult to do, and it's very expensive. So when you run a normal business, what you care about is profit. You count your profit and number of jobs you created, you're good. If you're a social business, for example, helping to improve learning outcomes, you expect it to track success of the kids way after you train them in school. But this is expensive and sometimes not feasible for smaller organization that works in remote rural conditions. And those issues could be exacerbated by the lack of infrastructure, for example, internet connectivity, but also roads, human capital, where it's very difficult to get quality labor and trained workers in poor labor markets and be able to pay for them. We know that financing solutions for social enterprises are very scarce and rare. They rarely have access to commercial capital because they lack collateral, and also they don't make as much profit, so they don't look appealing to the classic investors. So more of the patient capital is needed. And we know that policy and regulations are largely missing in developing countries that can help support the social, recognize and support the social businesses. In terms of, so I'll stop there. And then I know there is a couple of other examples on how we provide government support. So Agiliki Vasilu asked about, besides providing support to the government, how we help to improve the functioning of training and providing training to charity and CSR programs. So this is a big agenda for us, basically professionalizing NGOs or community-based organizations. We run into this as part of the decentralization devolution programs very often, where the government is trying to decentralize service delivery to the grassroots organizations on the ground, they're often charities or NGOs and community-based organizations, but they often functions at a subsidized model, and the government is interested in more financially sustainable models. So the courses and training we have also cater to that part of audience, and especially the e-learning provided, which focuses on how to improve the business model that the organization have, including focusing on sources of revenue, financial sustainability aspects, and how to use kind of results-based management to improve and refine the business model. We also have face-to-face trainings on financial sustainability, how to raise financial capital, how to work with investors, how to build connections with the government for more sustainable funds and collaboration. But also, again, back to the large database of business model innovations that Elaine is leading, these could inform the work of the charities and the CSRs, because it prevents them from reinventing the wheel, basically. So you have packaged solutions, you can build on them, and then you can adjust them to your local context, and also connect to peers who actually implemented the solutions in a sustainable way in similar conditions and learn from them. So I think those two parts is where we can.
Yeah, and then we also have another question on the education program that we presented on. Does the World Bank provide free materials or loans to the communities to start the program, and what governments or communities should do to make partnership in this project? The IFC actually was provided funding for a bridge initially, not initially, but at some point. But the World Bank, this is something that, you know, it's, as it is a social enterprise, they can actually work with the government like they have worked with the Liberia government. In the Liberia case, it was actually a foundation that provided the seed money for Bridge to adapt its material to the Liberian context, because they don't create their own material in the sense that, you know, they come up with their own curriculum. They actually follow the national curriculum. So it does have to be tailored to meet the country's standards for education. And even the teachers' qualifications match the teachers' qualifications of the public sector. So likewise, you know, the bridge model could be replicated if there is funding. If a country does request the bank to provide funding for that, that's something that can be worked out between the government and the World Bank. And that would take place maybe within the project loan or something like that. But it would has to become a request from the government for any World Bank funding to be considered.
So we are, I think, out of questions.
Okay, any other question? And otherwise, I would like to check if Antonio Fici, Professor Fici, is connected. I cannot see. Antonio, are you connected eventually? But they cannot. They can chat. So let's see.
I also don't think he's coming.
Okay. Any other question or suggestion, comments?
I mean, I think, so there's an extra question on how do you avoid providing funds that stimulate an organization in a way that's not sustainable. I think one of the things that we find is like the social enterprise, because their actual mission is social impact more than profit, they are trying to find ways that service the poor in a sustainable way, because they also don't want to be going back for funding and doing fundraising. They would rather develop a model that does put the poor at the center of the services and be the one that they have to be responsive to. We do try to see like a lot of NGOs that are trying to become more like social enterprises so that they can develop a more sustainable business model, and a lot of times they face a lot of challenges because especially if services were provided for free and now they have to charge for the services, this makes it more difficult. But there are means and mechanisms and strategies that other social enterprises have also developed to make this happen. And so part of our knowledge curation was to actually look at some of these strategies to see how it was that social enterprise, NGOs and social enterprises have become more self-sufficient in being able to make their products more affordable and to generate the revenue streams that they need to do to be sustainable.
So an additional question came in on the social entrepreneurship ecosystem in Latin America and the role of public policy. So in terms of the actual ecosystem diagnostic in Latin America, we haven't conducted any, but as part of our policy cataloging of policy experiences of the government, we looked at the example of Chile and of Colombia, and we also have a recent engagement in Colombia where we helped the government to understand how they can use social entrepreneurship and social innovation as part of their strategy to integrate the conflict-affected region of the country back into the economic and social tissue of the country. And so overall, not being an expert on Latin America social entrepreneurship, we have actually Christina Navarrete, who is, and I'll connect you with that. But it looks like it's a fairly booming region. I think the fact that the entrepreneurship environment overall and small and medium business environment is relatively good across Latin American countries created the space for social enterprises, but there is also a fairly strong community culture where there are lots of community-based organizations that are helping the poor to solve their own challenges. And so we know that there are many countries that are at the forefront of the social enterprise agenda. So Brazil, we know there are lots of examples from Brazil and social entrepreneurship. Chile has a fairly sophisticated policy that doesn't address the social entrepreneurship directly, but helps social innovation, inclusive innovation, and entrepreneurship overall, and that creates a conducive environment for social entrepreneurship as well. And then the social economy aspect is coming up into the public sphere. There was a recent conference and a discussion about how the social economy concept could help drive the new policy in Chile. Our team participated in that, and very interesting questions came up. And there are lots of other countries as well, like Colombia mentioned, but also, for example, Costa Rica is looking at the cabinet of the president level to stimulate and motivate the social enterprise sector more effectively. So overall, it looks like there is a lot of potential, but also a lot of government support and dialogue, and really good examples of how the governments in the Latin American region have already started supporting social enterprise sector in a systemic and systematic way. Actually, an interesting question just came up on the economic sustainability of social enterprises. It takes a long time and much longer than normal businesses. So one of the struggles that we have in helping the government and donors to design processes to support the social enterprise sector is that because these organizations maximize the social return on investment, they often sacrifice the financial return or accept below the market financial return on investment. And that leads to smaller pool of capital to play with and reinvest in expansion of the activities, in innovation, and basically attracting additional sources of commercial capital. And so as a result, it takes actually much longer for them to reach financial sustainability, especially considering that they're often targeting the population and the customer that has very, very low capacity to pay. So the profit margins are very slim. You need to reach huge numbers to become profitable and or financially sustainable, and you also are not driven by the financial sustainability. Another aspect is that often social enterprises try to connect to the government systems. And as all of you know, governments in developing countries are changing, they are not as predictable, it's much more risky to engage with the government. So there are often fallbacks and even organizations that we know that have achieved impressive scale, for example, the Agastya Foundation in India that provides supplemental curriculum to public schools to promote science, STEM, basically science and math education in kids and learning outcomes. It took them 18 years to become financially sustainable and reach scale and reach government partnerships. we feel we can accelerate those results. We feel that we can help social businesses become much more sustainable, scalable, and effective much faster by providing the systematic support through funding, capacity development, support to the ecosystem, and the government partnerships and policies.
Okay, we have one more question before we close our session. So if anybody has a burning question. Of course, we will be glad to continue a conversation directly via email or other forms, Skype, telephone, whatever. And we will provide, or you probably have already, but we will send also the email address of. And one more request before we close is please kindly fill out the feedback form that it's on your screen, so that we will improve our services for the next times. And you have space also to tell us any suggestion on substantial topics. If there are no other questions, we want to, on behalf of everybody, we thank you all for your participation, and we look forward to the next connection.